And that should do it. I should be live now. Whoa. I don't think I have any viewers yet, but to anyone who's watching this later, that's cool. Maybe some more people will show up in a bit. It does say one viewer. That might be me, because I was landing on the channel here. Oh, somebody followed. Who's the gazebo in the sky? Followed me right before I went live. Let me know if anyone's in the chat that people can hear me. What I hope to do today is to go look at some QAnon supporter stuff. There was we had the insurrection that happened, and the failed insurrection, and then you had the inauguration of Joe Biden, and that kind of like put QAnon supporters in a weird place. And I don't have like too much to say about it. I do get annoyed with kind of like the puff pieces, and I don't know that what we're going to watch right now is going to be a puff piece that kind of like glamorizes or like talks about like, oh hey, the QAnon people, they're just normal people. And the thing is, like, I do think they are in some sense normal people. Well, mostly they're like small business owners or people within the middle class of some kind, right? But I think it's true that anyone can sort of like fall into sort of like cultish behavior. And so there is something that I've just been generally interested in, which is how people get into cults, but then also how they leave. What happens to them such that they realize they made some sort of mistake and are now leaving this movement that they've invested a lot of time, energy, and money to. I don't know if the people in this video specifically were anyone who visited the Capitol, but like, I think one of the videos we're going to watch, the woman cried during Biden's inauguration, as if like, the evil leftists were now going to like start doing like blood rituals on day one and start eating children on their podiums or like whatever. So it is like fascinating that the inauguration wasn't that long ago. And so to go from being in complete, utter dismay that this guy is now the president of the United States, that what you conceived of as some like ringleader or at least patsy to some sort of like cult, child-eating cult, is now the president of the United States. Going from that to realizing that it was all just a lie in a few days is kind of fascinating. So I'm going to watch that in a second. I'm just going to try to post the link of this stream in a few more places and see if we can get a few more people in. So I don't know if anyone's joined yet. It's hard to tell. I find the Streamlabs, for whatever reason, does not update well. Like, I don't know. I found before, like, it'll still say there's 0 viewers, and yet people are clearly talking in the chat. So I didn't do a ton of promo on this one, so it would make sense that not a lot of people are here. And that's fine. That's fine. But promotion is fine too. Ooh, I advanced. Alright, so I guess we'll get started on this one. I think this is Don Lemon. Good old Don Lemon. Look at that. CNN Tonight. Is the Neo-Reactionary BS from that ugly bedbug in your video recommendations? That ugly bedbug in your video recommendations. You're going to have to be a bit more specific. Do you mean like Kian? Oh, wait, on the side here, video recommendations. Oh, you mean mold bug? You mean mold bug? Yeah. No, I'm. It's not going to be him. So here's. I was going to get into it when we get into it, and I will get into it, but covering people like Mencius or like Nick Land and all these other assholes. I would even include someone like Michael Malice, who I briefly got acquainted to recently. They are long-winded, and their videos are like an hour to 2 hours long, and it makes like reaction content very hard to do with them, because it's like I'm not going to sit here and watch and his thing is like Mencius Moldbug, like he's terrible when it comes to stuff. Very randomly, a lot of ums and ahs, and just like he'll go on like tangents about history that make no sense. But like I guess to other neo-reactionaries, they're like, oh shit, man, this is deep. And so no, it's not going to be him. This is going to be somebody else who's riffing on some content by Nick Land, who like Yarvin is into the whole Dark Enlightenment bullshit, if you're familiar with any of this content. But I would argue Nick Land is a lot worse. I think Nick Land is pro-eugenics, and but instead of calling it eugenics, I think he calls it hyper-racism, so a pleasant dude. But we're going to be watching somebody who made a video talking about some of Nick Land's ideas, and it's just really, really bad. Hyper-racism, yes. I don't think we're going to get into the hyper-racism stuff necessarily, but the video, it has to do with what the person in the video and Nick Land refers to as the trichotomy. So it's like a political compass, but instead of like the quadrants, it's like 3 things, and they get into a bunch of shit. And I wanted to use it as like a jumping point, because I am interested in deconstructing the bullshit behind the neo-reactionary movement, and I feel like the only the only way that I could do that is by covering other smaller content creators who make content about their content, because again, they're long-winded assholes. Hyper-racism, why hold back?
I hopped in to ask, why are we holding back off the hyper-racism?
I feel like the word hyper there has more to do with like digital racism.
Oh, I
Racism
thought it was going to be like a hyperplane of racism that exists beyond our current terrestrial plane. I was really excited. I wanted to hear about the new form of racism, that new racism.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with Mencius Moldbug, so like Nick Land is far out there. Although, like, again, shame to my old profession, Nick Land was a philosophy professor. So, hooray!
Okay, I know I've asked you this live,
Yeah.
but I'm going to ask you live again. What is this new thing you have with Mencius Moldbug? What is it? How do you even say his name? Is it
Mencius
Mencius
Moldbug?
Moldberg? Mencius Molbuck? Mencius Molberg?
Moldbug. Moldbug.
Menzies Menaria? I don't know. Like,
What's my fascination with him? Because he was influential in a way that I wish he wasn't. I mean, like all this talk about red pills, like it started from the Matrix movie, obviously, but he took it from the Matrix movie and made it this conservative thing that like now everyone's fucking talking about red pills, having to do with like conservative political ideology, right? He's sort of like infested things. And here's the thing, is like I don't want someone like Mencius Moldbug to even subtly be affecting the culture, because his end conclusion is that he wants a new monarchy, right? And let's be honest, when he says he wants a new monarchy, what's likely going to what he, even though he's more careful than Nick Land in trying to say that it's like it's not going to be a racist monarchy, it clearly is going to be a racist monarchy, because who is he allying with? He's allying with the ethno-nationalists and other assholes like this, right?
a hyper-racist monarchy, to be clear.
There's a Canadian in that movement with a bit of a following. Who by chance? I would be interested in looking into that. Settler's Lament. Okay, interesting. I will write that down for later. Look, I'm going analog now with my pen and papers. Settler's Lament. Yeah, because given that I do mostly Canadian stuff, it would be interesting to get that angle on it. Yeah, I mean, at least when it comes to neo-reactionary content, Elron. This is Elron in the chat for anyone who doesn't know. At least we might have
No,
given you like
no.
Jordan Peterson and Gavin McGinnis, but your neo-reactionary stuff is your export apparently.
Well, we like to do what Canada does and just do it better. What can I say?
Vienna with the joke. Only good academic, Nick, is Nick Landback as this. I don't know. What constitutes neo-reactionary? Neo-reactionaries are usually like people who basically want another monarchy. And so their idea is that really democracies don't function well and are basically inefficient. Therefore, we need to get rid of them. And what they want in place is basically to have either a monarch or an efficient businessman as their leader. That's why like a lot of these people got behind Donald Trump as well, because the idea was that if Donald Trump is this amazing business person, he would make America function like a business and destroy what they call the cathedral. So again, this is getting like way too deep into like neo-reactionary thought. But like the cathedral is this idea that really the power in America is in Hollywood, in the media, and in the universities, and not in government. So the idea is you want to shatter the cathedral as much as possible, and have society collapse into basically another civil war, and then what will replace it will be a monarch of some kind or an efficient businessman who will then be like Caesar Augustus and rule us all like an efficient, because everything that happened in Rome was perfect and good, and we must recapture what happened in the past. So now I'm obviously like strawmanning it a little bit, but like what I'm saying here is not too far off from what they're saying. And again, a lot of them seem to invite very like racist and racial ideology. Usually, like as with Nick Land's promoting eugenics and shit like that. So, but we are going to start with QAnon. As we all know, Rome was perfect and lasted forever. Yes, exactly. I was fascinated. I saw a clip today of someone leaving a QAnon cult, and so I haven't seen this clip in particular, so it might be boring, but it's only 5 minutes long. So we'll watch Don Lemon talk to a woman who has since left the QAnon movement. And I'm watching this mainly because I'm curious, as I said at the beginning when I started recording, although there was probably no one here. I'm really interested to see that people, like, how they talk about why they left. There's something very interesting to me regarding, like, cults and how people get involved with cults, but it's also interesting how these people get out of cults. So I mentioned, like, one of the women I saw today, and we're going to watch that clip after this one, she was like crying in tears at the inauguration, which was only like 2-3 weeks ago. Like it wasn't that long ago, right? Crying that this meant that like, the Democratic pedophile cult was going to be like sacrificing children on the altars at the Capitol building or whatever, and has since then realized that it was all bullshit and has left the movement. And so it's like fascinating to me the psychology that goes into that, of just only 2 weeks ago being the type of person like so in distress that you thought that these evil child-eating communists were taking over, to realizing that you were actually a part of a cult. And so I'm watching it for that. I'm hoping that, I mean, it's hard to tell. It's Don Lemon and it's CNN, so we might get some of the pablum of like, you're just normal people and like all this stuff. And like they are normal people, but I hate like how that gets played out in the media, because often these people are business owners. They're wealthy. They weren't really hard done by, and they're usually racist. Let's be real. I don't know that about these people either. So here we go.
So I'm joined, Linka is here. Linka is a former QAnon follower who doesn't follow QAnon before. So Linka, you told the New York Times that Trump used us and our fear. That's a quote from you. Now people caught up in the insurrection at the Capitol are saying that they were coaxed and used by the president and using it as a legal defense. You think that is fair for them to use as a legal defense to blame the former president?
I think there's a lot of people who are culpable, including Donald Trump, in my personal opinion. Um, I think that Donald Trump was clever enough to know that this whole conspiracy world was agitating people and really triggering their senses, and that in his own way he could manipulate them as well. Yeah.
So I want to ask.
I'm not sure what she fully said there. Like, it was the idea that like Trump is some sort of like spirit whisperer, and like said the magic words, and then like got them to like as if they were like Manchurian candidates to just like switch on and storm the Capitol. Like, I think it was more overt than that. Like, I don't know. And it's like weird too, because like I don't even think fully that like QAnon was necessarily Trump directed, other than the fact that I think there might be some sense in which, in just the confluence of the fact that QAnon existed and Trump was the person that he was, that it just sort of like fit together. But I don't know.
Ask you about because the whole, you know, the election was rigged thing was that was a whole impetus for the you know, the insurrection on Capitol Hill.
I feel like
and
Don
you made
Lemon's
the same
bored,
claim
too.
about the Democrats, but what the Democrats did between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders was the way the Democratic process works. It wasn't stolen from Bernie Sanders. That's how it works. So how did you view that as how did you become disillusioned by that?
Well, even though it wasn't illegal on paper to rig an election and, you know, work with the media to sort of sway public opinion towards one candidate over another, it still upset us. It really angered us. I mean, this was our Democratic Party, and we were Democrats being treated this way. And it wasn't acknowledged, and it wasn't rectified. And as a matter of fact, we ultimately ended up getting blamed for Hillary Clinton losing. So, you know, right there,
so
we're an angry group of people who are just seeking justice. And I guess you could say, like anybody with a passion and a little bit of anger, you can become a target to these conspiracies. They're very insidious. You can look at people who are normally...
I will say this is one reason why I get really frustrated when certain people on the left still talk about the Democratic primary, both back in 2016, but then the one that just happened, in terms of it being rigged. In part because it's like, I mean, rigged implies there was some sort of like cheating or nefarious plot, rather than like typical political maneuvering that is like within the legal bounds that are set up, right? And people might think that those legal bounds are unfair, but that's different than saying that the whole system is rigged, right? or that like cheating was involved in the process. And especially since like, so 2016, there was definitely, thank you, Nick, for you were a mod in my thing and you weren't even following me? Jesus Christ. Nick, I should ban you right now, Nick. Well, but even like the sentiment of it being anti-democratic, and Vienna, if Elron wants to drag you in, you can hop in the voice chat as well. Even like the language of being anti-democratic, I mean, I get hung up on that too, because like democracy, like there's so many rules and stuff, and here's like both sides, even the left, I think, would utilize the mechanisms involved to try to like not work the system, but get within the rules, get the system to play out the way that they want it to. And that's just like whatever, like you're never going to have like a perfect, just one-to-one vote thing, democratic thing, because there's always rules to that. How long should you allow people to get to the polls? When should the cutoffs be? And stuff like this. And I do agree that I want things to be more democratic, generally. And the one good thing is that came from the 2016 primary compared to the 2020 primary is because of how Bernie felt, and with the number of votes that he got, they were able to influence within the DNC to change some of the rules. Not all the rules, but I think those rule changes actually did make it at least better in 2020. But then what happened in 2020 was you had Obama step in and consolidate the other candidates were running. And a lot of people see that as a kind of anti-democratic rigging thing. But even that isn't like, you can imagine it in the Canadian system or something like that. Like, even like with our multiple parties, if like two parties were to team up, a lot of the other teams would freak out about that. But like, there's nothing in the rule book that says it's not allowed, right? And so it's like, of course, eventually some of these candidates were going to drop out. But like, a lot of people took that as like, like, you got the wrong message. It's one thing saying that we need to reassess the rules here so that we can make it more fair, or at least what we consider to be more fair. But instead it turns into like the DNC somehow like cheated in some capacity. And that what that does is, for one, it feeds into sort of like conspiracy thinking. And unlike some people on the left, like I know there's like the QAnon pod and stuff like this, and they tend to think that somehow one way of appealing to like right-wing conspiracy theorists is to be like, hey, become a left-wing conspiracy theorist. But I think all conspiracy theories are bad, at least the ones that have no basis in reality. But I think if and like, because here's the thing, is like, as soon as you feed into that line that it's like cheating, and you become like immune to anyone to point out to you that like it wasn't in fact cheating. Like, we can sort of like have a debate on the fairness, but it played out the way that it did. But it doesn't mean that the democratic structures are necessarily like completely broken. And what I mean by that is like, there's still possibility for the more left-wing part of the Democratic Party to influence change within the structure of the party. I don't think that has been completely... That possibility has been completely decimated. I'm also not saying that like we should only focus on democratic politics or whatever. I am still a hardcore lefty that thinks like, yes, organize outside of party structures and stuff like this. But I do think there is some benefit to having people like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib all in there pushing them further to the left. As much as they can, you know, like, it's not going to be perfect. But you can see it like here, like, isn't it, like, the whole reason why I went down this path is because this woman herself, she went from being like, it was rigged in 2016, like there's some sort of elite oligarchic force that's rigging this thing, to somehow then supporting Donald Trump in QAnon and saying that the news media was like rigging that as well, you know? And it's like, I would rather people just stay in reality a bit more.
Anti-vaxxers who are very, cautious of pharmaceutical companies. And once they start following the breadcrumbs of social media, all of a sudden they're believing in these conspiracies that Bill Gates is putting, some kind of trackers in the vaccines. And so these are very people, intelligent people that are succumbing to this.
It just seems that there are more. So it seems that there are people who may be more prone to believe conspiracies. Because I hear your argument on the left about Bernie Sanders again is the mirror of the argument that led to the insurrection.
I don't think it's the mirror
on Capitol Hill. So
I mean, we could ignore
could
Don.
Perhaps that there are just people like yourself who are prone to conspiracy theories, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, because people can't. I'm sure people won't be able to see how you went from Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party to Donald Trump and QAnon in the Republican Party. It's just too far of a swing on the pendulum. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. And see, that's where I said there's so many different pieces, because now we can talk about social media and the algorithms. So as soon as you click or like or share on a video or a link or what have you that might have some basis of conspiracy or some agenda, by the end of the week, your entire news feed is filled with very similar material.
Do you think there should be, do you think that you, so what I'm hearing you're saying is...
And I'll say to that too, for the Zach Mondo 1, who was pointing this out at the beginning, right? Like my feed, like I've got Mencius Moldbug fucking recommends through YouTube, trying to get me to watch neo-reactionary content constantly. Now, like, I'm at least someone who, I came to that content with a purpose to let's say, discuss it and analyze it and say, like, here's a problem area. But now the algorithm thinks that I'm super into that content. So all I get constantly is recommendations. And not even the recommendations. There's times where, like, I'll be finishing a music video and it'll go from the music video to playing neo-reactionary content as one of, like, the next video to play. Journalist YouTube is what I call it. Yeah, it's so it's like all it takes is someone to watch one QAnon conspiracy thing that might be talking about, like, how the DNC thing was rigged, and then all of a sudden you go from that to now you're watching how, like, not only was the thing rigged, but, like, Hillary was in the background, like, eating a baby. So don't go down that path.
Social media plays a big role in this. Do you think that there should be more fact-checking and more guarding of the platform on social media than just a sort of a free-for-all for everyone to be able to go on there and say whatever it is that they want to say?
Well, if that were possible, you know, I know that I was studying how social media works through documentaries like The Social Dilemma, and it seems like it's kind of a monster that's out of control at this point. And, you know, I don't know how people can step aside and do some fact-checking now. They just want information so quickly.
Hey, Linka.
And when you log on to your social media, it's, you know, it's just all right there. It keeps coming at you.
So, Linka, I have to go, but do you think that, do you blame social media in any way? Do you think that it helped in some way to...
Absolutely.
To groom you and to change? Okay. Linka.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. That fascinating conversation. I wish I...
And I want to say that too. Like, this person actually reminds me a lot of my mom. Just even in her mannerisms, there's something about it where, like, this is kind of like my mom. But, like, it is true that, like, I brought up my mom because, like, I've had these discussions with her frequently. Not that my mom has ever gone down, like, a QAnon rabbit hole, but she is someone who's been more gullible on some of, like, the alt medicine and stuff like this. And part of that is an inability for the average person to assess truth in any capacity. And I'm not saying, like, that, like, necessarily getting a university degree gives you the capacity to know and understand what truth is. Because, like, and, you know, there's tons of people like Nick Landa, the neo-reactionary, like, having a degree does not necessitate that you're going to hit upon, like, true things or something like this. But there is a way of being someone who has gone to higher education and learn how to do research appropriately that at least can mitigate some of this stuff, or at least you hope it would. Where I feel like the average person going down a rabbit hole like this, who doesn't have the tool set required to analyze this stuff, it becomes very hard to even think about, well, what is truth? And especially when you start finding that some of this shit is appearing on, like, Fox News or things that you would think. I think a lot of people think that, like, well, why would they put this on television if it wasn't true? Like it's almost like an intuitive thing to them. Like, it wouldn't be on television if it wasn't true. And so that gives it, like, this weight, this credibility. I think I was having this conversation with Elrond recently too, which is that like, a book. There's something about, like any asshole can publish a book nowadays and just, like, post it online or whatever. But even that, like Ezra Levant, the person I do my podcast about, right? He writes books, but his books are not sourced. There's no sources, and it's about, like, I had to do, like, super extra research to find out what the fuck he was talking about in certain paragraphs. And even then, it's like, you still, when you read it, you're like, well, there's gotta be truth here. It's a fucking book. You wouldn't publish a book if it wasn't true, right? It's like these objects have, like, they carry weight to them. It's physical. It's in my hand. It's a book. But then you find that it's like anyone can make this shit up, you know?
It's that mythical, that mythos of being published, right? Of having your words put to page and laid out for all of history to bear. Like, of course, it's history now. There must be some truth to it. But yeah, no, the way it works now, doesn't matter. You can write whatever.
Yeah. I forgot. I guess if you're in the chat, do you want to... Should I share the video with you? Do you want to watch the next one?
Oh, yeah. No, that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, since you joined later, I completely forgot to do that with the...
No, I was just enjoying 30 seconds behind, you know.
Yeah.
I agreed. Don Lemon looked super bored. I don't know. He was not... not really...
I couldn't tell if it was boredom or if it was a worry of how to word things. Like part of... There was some times when I was like, I don't think he knows enough about QAnon, that I feel like he's almost like nervous to like go too deep in it. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. There was a weirdness to that interview that I couldn't quite place.
No, I felt that.
UFOs to satanic pedophiles in 60 seconds. Yes, when I saw this comment, I did want to say the one thing that fascinates me about UFO stuff, and I can't help but notice it now. I grew up like loving UFO stuff. I wouldn't say that I was ever someone who like actually believed in any like alien conspiracies, but I grew up watching the X-Files, and it was just something that like I loved as a kid and like got into reading all this shit. And so I don't know if I go back to that content in the 90s, whether or not I'm going to find the same thing. But now whenever I see somebody like promoting UFO stuff, I take 2 seconds to look into some of the other content that they do and work on, and it almost always ends up at like Jewish conspiracy theories. And I don't and now I cannot unsee it. It's like whenever someone's talking about UFOs or aliens, eventually they're going to talk about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and they're out to lunch on like Jewish conspiracy stuff. I don't fully know what the connection is there. I have a feeling it has a lot to do with David Icke, who did the like reptilian theory shit. But like now, like every UFO cultist, like it's like you can't just have fun talking about the prospect of like aliens visiting us anymore without it turning into like eugenics shit. And, and it's such a bummer. Like maybe I just want to talk about aliens. Ruin all my fucking fun. Coast to Coast played a big role in that. Yeah, I guess that too. So this is the one that I saw. This one is a little more interesting. Hopefully we'll get more about why they left.
One South Carolina mom who became a QAnon follower actually feared that she and her daughter would have to go into hiding after President Biden took office because of all the disinformation she fell for. Then her QAnon fever broke, and she came to her senses. CNN's Joni O'Sullivan joins us with her story. This is fascinating, Joni. So tell us what happened, her whole trajectory.
Hey, Alison. Yeah, many followers of QAnon still believe this conspiracy theory, but we spoke to one woman who voted for Trump in November, but recently just realized QAnon is a lie. Have a listen.
When President Biden was sworn in,
Hi, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
I was just crying. I mean, I couldn't stop, like that ugly cry that you do. It just kept going, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing the funeral of our country. And instantly I went into panic mode. I had to call my mom, and I just told her, I was like, we're all gonna die. We're gonna be owned by China. And I was like, I might have to pull my daughter out of school because they're gonna take her. I was scared to death.
Could you imagine like sincerely believing that to the point of like having to take your kids out of school?
No. No, I can't.
Like I'm not laughing at this person because clearly this person fell into some shit, right? But it's like just the absurdity of it, of like realizing you're like that you've gone down a rabbit hole to such extent that is false, that we know to be false. Yet you don't know that it's false, and you take it so seriously that you're going to like make dramatic life choices based on it. It's sad.
Death.
Ashley Vanderbilt, a South Carolina mom who says she lost her job early in the pandemic, fell deep down the QAnon conspiracy theory rabbit hole before November's election.
How did you get into this world and go down this rabbit hole?
Well, I started seeing TikToks, and I didn't know that it was conspiracy things. I just thought it was, they were telling me something that nobody else knew. So then I would reach out to different friends of mine that were bigger Trump supporters. I would say, you know, I saw this on TikTok, what do you think? and they'd start sending me YouTube videos. They would start sending me different Facebook Live videos. And one thing led to another. I just went down this rabbit hole learning all this stuff. But I mean, what have we heard the last 4 or 5 years? Don't watch the news, fake news, fake news. I don't watch the news, I don't read newspapers, like I don't do anything. I've always been someone that you just tell me what to do and I do it. I grew up being told we were Republicans, so I've always been that straight red ticket.
How do you think?
I've been the type of person where you just tell me what to do and I go and do it. How, like, there's a great book, USA. It's deeper than that though. Like there's a great book and I recommend that everyone should go out and read it. It's free. It's online. It's by Bob Altemeyer and it's called The Authoritarians. And Bob Altemeyer was a researcher at a University of Manitoba, I think. And so a Canadian psychologist. And he focused on he coined this idea. It's called right-wing authoritarianism, and he basically created a bunch of like metrics that you can run to like get people to answer like this huge questionnaire, and then it can determine to what extent you're a right-wing authoritarian. And he then could like run predictive models that like people who after filling out this survey who are identified by his metrics as right-wing authoritarians, you can kind of predict how they would react in certain situations, to certain things. And it's that, like, she summed that up so perfectly there that it's kind of horrifying, which is like what these like conspiracies like feed into. Like, these are the types of people that want a strong man to just tell them what to do, and how like terrifying that is. The other thing that's terrifying is like Bob Altemeyer's work shows that they represent at least 20 to 30% of the population at any time, in any place. So they represent a large, active and mobile force. And the reason why they're active, I mean, if you're the type of person who, as she described, you're so worried, you're so fearful that you're willing to make dramatic life choices, like take your daughter out of school and stuff like this. You're the type of person who's highly motivated to go to the polls and vote, which is why it's like, no matter what, there's a certain base of authoritarians that are going to vote Republican no matter what, because they feed into that personality very well. It doesn't matter about truth. It's just like you're the figurehead, and I'm gonna believe you no matter what. I'm just looking for a person to tell me what to believe. And since you're willing to go up there and tell me, and you're gonna alleviate my fears by telling me like, don't worry, I will crush the satanic cult that is the Democrats, right? And it's also why you can tell, like, if you watch like. If you look at like a population metrics of how popular Donald Trump was, Donald Trump remained around the 30 to 40% approval rate, and would never drop below it. Sup, Jody of Imperial News. Living the dream, talking about QAnoners leaving QAnon. What's up with you, Famous Horse? And everyone should go check out Famous Horse's content, because it's fantastic. Even their Dungeons and Dragons stuff, it is quite fun. But they do great political content as well. Good things, QAnon factional army grow in Ontario. Yeah, I mean, like, the QAnons in Ontario. Like, that actually blew my mind when I first saw that. And I still have I have the image somewhere on my computer. I'm not going to pull it up. But there was someone at our city hall in London, Ontario, had a sign it must have been 2 years ago. And I remember going, like, I know about QAnon because I'm a weird person, but like 2 years ago, QAnon was not as big. And then there was somebody at our city hall with like a Q knows the truth sign. And I'm just like, I knew then, like, that was an omen for what's to come. That was bad news. It was just spread, like, this weird American-oriented conspiracy theory had somehow spread to Canada. Even though, like, I don't know, I guess Trudeau is a part of the pedophile cult now. I don't know.
I think that videos like this started showing up in your feed.
Well, originally I was just following like entertainment stuff, but sometime when maybe people started like campaigning, I started liking a lot of Trump posts and things that were anti-Biden, and the algorithm must have just brought
Donald
that
Trump
kind
with
of
the
stuff to
hand
me.
pump action
Right before the
all fucking
inauguration, you didn't believe Biden was really going to get sworn in.
No, I expected a blackout. I expected the TV to go black and nothing to work, and so we wouldn't see anything. The assumption of what would happen would be that most of the Democratic leaders there, quite a few of the Republican leaders, all the Hollywood elite that had attended, they'd all be arrested. The military's going to haul them off.
I don't know why I found that funny. All the Hollywood elite, and then it just freezes on Lady Gaga going, ah! Because that's a representative of the Hollywood elite.
It is. What are you talking about? That's the most elite. That is what Hollywood looks like in a nutshell. Just Lady Gaga screaming.
All the Hollywood elite that had attended, they'd all be arrested. The military's going to haul them off. They said that Trump opened back up Guantanamo Bay, and then the military would run the country, put us in martial law because the left would come too unhinged and they'd be a danger to us. And then Trump would come back when the government was rebuilt. I know it sounds crazy.
Isn't like... It reminds me of... There's this fantastic article, and I recommend it to everyone. And it was written by Lawrence Wright in The New Yorker. Can't remember the title. But it was about Paul Haggis, who, like, I don't know why, like, London, Ontario seems to be the nexus for everything. But Paul Haggis was a London, Ontario kid and eventually got sucked into the Scientology cult. He went on to become a famous director. I think he won Best Director for his movie Crash, which actually kind of sucked. But it was a movie that I think won Best Picture, some shit. I don't know. It had, like, a whole bunch of actors, and it was supposed to be about race relations or some shit. But in this article that Lawrence Wright wrote about Paul Haggis and him leaving the cult was, I guess, like, if people don't know about Scientology, the elite of Scientology, the, like, actors and directors or, like, famous people, are kind of, like, cordoned off from the everyday Scientologists that get exploited and get the money, like, sucked out of them. And he had a family and a bunch of kids, and his kids turned out to be, I think 2 of them ended up being lesbians. I think that's right. And when it came up in California, I don't know if people remember this. I feel like it was 2008, but there was Proposition 8, which basically California had already voted to allow gay marriage, and Proposition 8 was going to take it away. And Scientology, along with Mormons and other religious groups, ran a, like, vote yes on Proposition 8 campaign, and eventually it passed, and they, like, reverted back to not having gay marriage in the state, basically. And while this was happening, Haggis realized that Scientology was campaigning on this, and he didn't know at the time that actually L. Ron Hubbard, which is not related to the L. Ron Hubbard in our chat.
Hello, how's it going? Right here.
They didn't realize that L. Ron Hubbard had written in Dianetics and, like, other writings that there was something wrong with gay people, right? So, like any religious cultish figure in the 1950s, L. Ron Hubbard as well was a homophobe. And so Haggis did not know this and petitioned David Miscavige, who at the time when Proposition 8 was happening was the head of the church. He is still the head of the church. And was basically told, like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, it was just a local group that sort of went rogue. We're trying to, like, rein them back in and all this fun stuff. But then Haggis realized that they were still campaigning for it. And he's like, I told you. Like, and for whatever reason, this was the moment where he clicked in his head, where he was told his whole life not to research Scientology. But because of this, like, one thing, he was like, I'm going to type Scientology into Google and see what happens. And this, of course, like, takes you down, like, this, like, rabbit hole. And he has this moment. And the piece, it's a huge article in the New Yorker, again, by Lawrence Wright. But it gets to the end of it, and, like, he just realized, like, the way he describes it to Lawrence Wright, it's just, like, crazy. Where you just, like, wake up one day and be like, holy shit, I'm in a cult. I've invested so much money and effort and time in a fucking cult that harms people, that treats people terribly. And, like, to me, like, there's something about the psychology of that, like, is fascinating to me. Like in like also a horrifying way of just like being a cogent human being and having the capacity to be self-aware that you invested all this time in something that's complete and utter bullshit. And then having the courage to like announce that to the world and be like, hey, I fucked up. I was involved in a cult. And so there is something to how this woman, I don't know, it just reminded me of this, of just like, she just described all the shit that she thought was going to happen and then it didn't come true. And just realizing now upon reflection how fucking stupid that sounded, you know?
I've become too unhinged and they'd be a danger to us. And then Trump would come back when the government was rebuilt. I know it sounds crazy.
Like, how do you deal with that? Like, oh.
And then Biden got sworn in.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel?
I was devastated.
The belief among QAnon supporters that Biden would not be inaugurated was wrong. Ashley Vanderbilt realized she had bought into a conspiracy theory.
Well, I was wrong.
How do you feel now, knowing that you believed all this stuff?
It's weird. I think I spent a lot of time this year isolated from everybody. You know, I've just been home a lot. I've lost my job last April in 2020 and I was super depressed. And I think in a way I probably lost touch with a little bit of reality and that almost that common sense. And so I'm not so much embarrassed for what I believed, but I mean, I feel foolish. I was stressed out all the time, so my home life, like with my 4-year-old, I feel like I definitely had a lot less patience with her. There would just be times where I would just snap. I would just get so upset with her. So I've had to apologize to her a lot for being like, I'm sorry for just even getting hateful towards you. Like, it is not you, it is me. I got my own stuff going on.
I mean, you must be happy that, for your daughter's sake, that you've been able to get out of this.
Yeah, she needs her mom. And I wasn't 100% there like I should have been.
A spokesperson for TikTok said the company is committed to countering misinformation and content promoting QAnon is not allowed on its platform. After finding QAnon through TikTok, Ashley said the only
I will say, like, there's been a push that I've noticed, and there's been a couple people who are more left-leaning YouTubers that have had their content taken down for doing videos critical of QAnon. Who knows? Maybe that'll happen to me now for doing this. But we are all Irish. And so it's like, the thing is, like, I appreciate the move in terms of, I know everyone gets involved in this whole, like, media censorship shit, but I think it's good to have a terms of service, and I think it's good to have a terms of service that cracks down on fascistic movements, because they can become dangerous, as was seen on January 6th. But that being said, I think that these social media companies definitely, you know, if they're going to do it, should at least staff and have the people there to actually analyze this stuff, so they're not just using fucking bots that just like auto ban people off of YouTube for doing videos like I'm doing now, which is like going through this shit and pointing out why QAnon is stupid, or just even just interested in the psychology of the people who are leaving the movement.
thing that might have pulled her out of it before the inauguration was if Trump spoke out against it.
I was the biggest Trump supporter there was. If he were to have said something, and if he were to just say Q's illegitimate, nothing's real in there, I think some people would leave. Maybe not all, the people that are way too far into it, but I think it would help a lot of.
It would have helped you?
Mm-hmm. I thought the world of him, so if he would have said that's not real, I'm not coming back, it is over, I would have believed him.
Oh my gosh, Donnie. Oh my gosh. It is so valuable to have somebody as honest now,
I don't know if
and
I want
sort
to
of
watch
now
their,
self-aware
like,
as she is to explain how it happens. I think that was very insightful, hearing that isolation and depression lead to it, and so do TikTok and YouTube.
Yeah, because they're gonna make it about social media, because of course they are. Because it's not just about social media. I mean, like, social media doesn't help, right? And it does, the algorithm does take you down this path. But again, she was the type of person, like, she set it out there, right? Like, it's the psychological fact that's fascinating to me of, you know, being the type of person that wants to be told what to do and will just do it. And all it takes is for a strong person, a strong man, to then come out and be like, do this. These are the enemies. They're trying to attack you. You need to do this. And she was primed for it. And then social media kicks in, right? But anyways, I found that very fascinating. Now we can move on to neo-reactionary shit. Now, here's the thing about this video. I don't really know who this person is, but you can tell we're getting into neo-reaction. So, of course, this person's called Charlemagne and has a picture of Charlemagne on the thing. Only safe media format is woodcuts. The reason why I'm doing this video, it's an old video. I just stumbled upon it. I've been wanting to talk about neo-reactionary shit for a while, in part because I think there's something interesting to, even with watching the QAnon content that we just watched, which is that it's clear social media has this effect of sucking people into these rabbit holes where they get fed a certain amount of content. So this video has like 20,000 views, which is depressing all on its own, but it's clear the algorithm is pushing people into a certain content. And even as I watch this shit, I get recommended QAnon crap and all this stuff. So it's likely that the reverse is happening too, where people who are into that shit are getting funneled into this stuff. This dude makes content with Settlers Lament. Okay, good. So fun times had by all. So this dude, the reason why this video interests me, well, for one, the hardest part of getting into this content is that they're long-winded and it's really fucking annoying. So I would love to do a video on Mencius Moldbug and break down why all the stupid shit that he says is, well, stupid. And what I might do is I might like break it down or read some of his shit. I don't know. I have some ideas that I'm working with that I want to get into. And I think it's worthwhile breaking it down because surprisingly, their content gets a shit ton of views. And that scares the shit out of me as someone who watches this stuff and goes, these people want a dictator. You know, they're going to call it a monarch, but what they want is a dictator. They want America to have a second civil war, and they want to instill their own version of a dictatorship. And I think that's concerning if you start getting people who say QAnon was not a sufficient hit for them, and now they're going into this content to get an even bigger hit, right? So it's not just that the Democrats are a pedophile cult, but in fact, democracy leads to pedophile cults, and therefore we need a strong dictator to purge us all from this bullshit. And that's worrying to me. So I want to dip into this content. But again, they're long-winded. They're long-winded as hell. And so I wanted to just taste this one, because I think it's 13 minutes long, but I think there's enough here to just sort of like outline the wordiness of their content and also like the kind of like weirdness of their theories. So they're big on sort of like having this like what I want to call like a veneer of intellectualism. They're all like huge on like creating categories and wanting to map shit out. And they make a lot of references. We won't necessarily go down like the referencing rabbit hole, but like they're really big on like mapping sort of like the terrain out in specific ways. And so this whole video is about this thing they're going to call the trichotomy, and then it somehow expands from that to covering like all of politics. Because all of politics can be explained by this like one simple theory, right? And so I think it's just a fascinating thing to look at. And so we're just going to have a taste here, and maybe in the future, and I'll assess from all of you whether or not you want me to continue with this content. But I think it's interesting that we should be prepared for when maybe like neo-reactionary thinking could start bubbling up in places you would least expect it, and I want people to be prepared for when that's coming. And so here we go. Neo-reactionary trichotomy. This person pronounces trichotomy like really, really annoying as well, so prepare yourself for that.
I have recently encountered a neo-reactionary concept named the trichotomy. It is based on a blog post written by Spandrel, coined by Nick Steves, and popularized by other neo-reactionaries including Nick Land. I discovered the trichotomy via the livestream Distands 7 on the Distributists channel. A user by the name of the Rightful King of Finland, who is also subscribed to my channel, asked a question about the trichotomy in a super chat message. I highlight this to indicate the importance of community and action. Participation is key to the maintenance of a healthy right-wing network, and you never know what impact your engagement might have. In this case, it caused the creation of this video. The trichotomy describes...
So, this isn't, like, relevant to, like, obviously this is, like, staging ground to say why he got interested in wanting to make this video. But I will say, the other horrifying thing is, these people get a shit ton of super chats. Which tells me that the people who are ingesting this content have the money to just be throwing it like fucking crazy at these people. You watch a Michael Malice video, like, this is, like, the most horrifying. So Michael Malice is another one of these people. His whole video is just people donating, and he'll sit there for an hour just answering people's questions. And he must make like $2,000 to $3,000 just from super chats, just from doing an hour of content, just answering. And here's the other thing that's like really depressing is he's a fucking dick to some of the people asking him questions that donated the money, and they keep donating more to them. And so this is, like, I guess, a message to YouTube generally, is that, like, YouTube is allowing these people to profit off their platform while promoting the idea of wanting to, like, abolish society. Keep that in mind.
Describes three general categories of individuals who together occupy the neo-reactionary space. Spandrel first breaks down neo-reaction into a dichotomy of traditionalists and futurists, two groups mutually dissatisfied with modernity, one looking to the past and the other to the future. However, he immediately expands this to a more useful trichotomy, containing the religious or traditionalist branch, the ethnic or nationalist branch, and the capitalist branch.
So I love how he frames this as more useful. Go for it.
Maybe you can distill it for me, because I feel like I've stumbled upon one of those deep web conspiracy theory videos, and I don't know where we're at.
So what we got is this so we got technology capitalism, tradition and patriarchy, ethno-nationalism, and the three of these things equal neo-reaction. That is sort of what's being set up here.
Okay, right? I'm following the math so far. I got it. I got the algebra.
So, I don't, like, technology, it gets weird here, but, like, what's going on here is this is your basic, like, it's like the Elon Musk fetishism.
I was just about to say, is that Daddy Musk going to take us to Mars?
Yes, this is Daddy Musk is going to take us to Mars. And it's also like the ANCAPs, right? The kind of like, just leave us alone to like run our small business and like that kind of shit, right? Then tradition and patriarchy, this is like the misogyny, women should be making sandwiches. And then ethno-nationalism is the, black people bad. And all three of these together equal neo-reaction. So we already see this is a problematic philosophy. Like, it's couched in these like fancy terms, but what they're really saying is we want a society that treats women like shit, separates the races, and is being led by Elon Musk. Is essentially
take us to Mars.
Yeah.
We want segregated, subservient women on Mars. Neo-Reaction 2020.
And remember, he's getting this stuff from Nick Land, and I wanna read just part of Nick Land's, because I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the thing, but like, here's like the beginning of Wikipedia. It goes, Nick Land is an English short story, horror writer, blogger, and formerly a philosophy academic. He is known by some as the father of accelerationism. His writings are theory fictions, a genre created by the philosopher Jean Baudrillard, a co-founder of the 1990s collective Cybernetic Culture Research Unit. His work has been tied to the development of accelerationism and speculative realism. And then it goes, Land is also known, along with fellow neo-reactionary thinker Curtis Yarvin, who's Mencius Moldbug, for developing in his later works the anti-egalitarian, and anti-democratic ideas behind neo-reaction and the Dark Enlightenment, his later work has become increasingly focused on advocating for scientific racism and eugenics, or what he calls hyper-racism. So this is... these are the types of people we're getting these theories from. Now, what I find like really frustrating about a lot of these people too, and we're probably going to get some of this in this video as well, is they never like go into the details of like justifying any of this stuff. Like I never hear, I've watched a lot of Mencius Moldbug now, and I never hear like any depth to why he thinks races are real, biologically real, when the consensus in the literature is that they're not. They're mostly social constructs. Based on real features, but they're social constructs, right? And they don't really go into the details there. They just assume it to be true and then move on, right? There must be differences, so therefore, right? And I think that's one thing that frustrates me about their content, and so I want to like flag that up front, which sometimes it feels like they're focusing on all this like techno babble at the surface level and never going on to justify any of the reasons they adopt some of the positions that they have.
Branch and the capitalist branch. Nick Land calls these theonomists, ethno-nationalists, and techno-commercialists. This trichotomy sparked a torrent of discussion in the right-wing blogosphere. As Nick Land points out, people like to be categorized, and they can be expected to battle with other categories of people. This has been useful to neo-reactionaries because it provides a testing ground for ideas, and being oriented towards truth, neo-reaction rejects ideas that do not meet that standard. The trichotomy is also not reducible to any new fusion, which is why each segment remains distinct from the others, despite some ideological overlap.
Okay, one sec. My fucking mentor cap's going on. Listen, my dude, we might disagree about how the world works. We might have different views of society. But I'm gonna help you out, my dude. Get all of that onto one line, make that picture bigger, and make it so the audience can understand. Because that's too much. I zoned out, man. I can't do it. We're clearly not as smart as you. Make it make sense.
I love, as astrology reveals, and more sophisticated systems confirm,
holy
people
shit,
delight in being categorized. I mean, like, again, like, there's something, like, trivially true about that. Like, people like to identify themselves as something, right? But it's like...
I'm a Scorpio.
Yeah. Like, why is that your go-to example? As astrology reveals. It's like, you could have been like, as band genres reveal.
As colors reveal.
Yeah. I also like, so you can also tell, like, they use certain things where because we haven't talked about the cathedral yet, but this person obviously takes it for granted because it's right here. The trichotomy makes it impossible for neo-reaction to play at dialectics with the cathedral. For that reason alone, we should be grateful to it. So the idea is like they're always... The cathedral, again, that's Hollywood and the universities is what the cathedral is. And it's like the seat of left-wing thought is sort of like how they sort of like frame it. And they're arguing that like the trichotomy like is so alien to how the cathedral thinks that it's like the perfect red pill. That's kind of like what they're saying here. It's the perfect red pill because it like blows their mind because it's like 3 things instead of the quadrant theory, like instead of the 4 things on the political compass, you know? And so it's like a way of them being like, we've come up with our own model that exists outside of how the cathedral wants you to think, man. And that's like they always talk in that way. So their enemy is always the cathedral. And now I don't think this is too like far out there that I can't comprehend it. I just think it's fucking stupid. And I think it's stupid because like, why be an ethno-nationalist, right? Why be a traditionalist, right? None of these things are fucking justified.
Despite some ideological overlap, Land argues that this trichotomy is far more than just a novel observation. He argues that it is not novel at all, but a fundamental emergent structure of European civilization. Each structure has its own hierarchy that intersects with the hierarchies of the others, and they mutually ensure the stability of society by moderating each other. This model, as applied to neo-reaction, is a variant of the model used by Europe for centuries, which is that of the estates of the realm. The estates of the realm consists of the first estate, which is the clergy, the second estate, which is the nobility, and the third estate, which is the commoners.
So, I want you to notice that what's happening here. The move that was just made here is literally, this thing has 3 things. This thing has 3 things. Ba-da-da-da!
Well,
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I almost feel, I can't remember, I watched this video a long time ago, but I almost feel like he's going to say that it has something to do with the Trinity as well. You know, like it's...
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's hidden in there. The Triforce, the Trinity. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I got 2 monitors. I got a wandering brain. I feel like I look away for like half a second, and I come back, and it's just like I'm on an acid trip or something. Yeah. I don't know what the hell's going on.
That's because you're in the cathedral, man. You gotta get out of the cathedral. You're an educator. You're super in the cathedral, man.
I need to take that red pill. Open my mind. Open my third eye.
No, but like, really, like, what did he say in the past, like, 2 minutes? Like, there's like all the images with the fancy fucking triangles, and he's like, yo, it's like higher dimensional space, bro. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. And it's not that I don't know what he's talking about because I'm stuck in a cathedral. It's just like, you're just using big words for the sake of using big words. Like, are you saying that the trichotomy is just like a bit more complicated? Like, okay, fine. Then like complicate your trichotomy. Like, why do you gotta use these like nondescript images of fucking triangles?
Google image triangle and add that to my video.
There's 3 triangles, bro. 3 of them, and each triangle has 3 sections.
This is irrefutable evidence. I got nothing. There's nothing to refute, so it's irrefutable. I don't know.
And you know what it reminds me of? Have you ever seen that movie with Jim Carrey? What is it? Is it 22, 21? Where he just sees the number
23,
like
23, yeah.
It's a similar, like, I feel the same way while watching this. It's like, yo, patterns, don't you see it? The number, it's everywhere. You faded out there completely, so I don't know if there's something wrong with your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hello? This is Clem Fandango. Can you hear me? Patterns, bro. There's patterns.
You now reminded me. I hid a Toast of London reference in our latest podcast episode. Find
Toast
it out.
Of London.
Yes.
Consists of the first estate, which is the clergy, the second estate, which is the nobility, and the third estate, which is the commoners. The religious or traditionalists obviously map to the clergy. The capitalists map to the nobility. This is apparent when one considers the contemporary polemics against the elites, the nobles of the 21st century whose power comes from their wealth. The nationalists map to the commoners, which is perhaps more readily observed now, 3 years after Land wrote this article. President Trump speaks directly to and in the interest of the commoner. That is, he is essentially populist. To associate the ethnically or nationally oriented people with the commoner is not a slight, as this class plays just as crucial a role in the maintenance of civilization as the other two.
I will say the thing that fascinates me about this is it sounds like what he's saying is like the plebes are the ones who are the racists, right? But as we've pointing out, like a lot of these people who are the ethno-nationalists, like this Nick Land person, like these are people who worked in academia that have some amount of like money, right? And even in this like trichotomy description they have here, I just love the wording of this. So in the commenters section, it says, ethno-nationalists. No offense, dear ethnats. That sounds fucking gross. The commoners of the Middle Ages were a population which included the middle class and upper middle class, which brimmed with many talented and intelligent individuals, just as they do today, the cream of which undoubtedly forms the neo-reactionary ethno-nationalist camp. So they talk about them as if they're the plebes, but even this admits that, like, they're the upper middle class, the middle to upper middle class, which are the same types of people who are the ones who are afraid of the proletariats rising up and creating, like, racial equality, right? So they're not the commoners, right? They're like, when are the middle class the commoners? The commoners are the working class.
Imagine making a video where you say, Donald Trump speaks for the plebeians.
Yeah.
Not the patricians,
Speaks
the
to
plebeian.
the everyman.
He speaks... This man with his gold-plated toilet speaks for me. He really understands what it's like to have to choose between food and shelter. He gets me. He gets me in a way no one else can.
Yeah. That's what they think. That's what they think. But I do love what else is implicit in what he's saying. He's saying that Trump appeals to the racists. He's like, oh, like, this is the one thing that fascinates me about neo-reactionaries. They don't really hide their beliefs, you know? It's not like he's hiding the fact that he wants to work with fucking racists. They're right here, ethno-nationalists. What the hell do you think that they are? They're people who think that there's different biological racial categories, and that there's something wrong with these categories getting along, and therefore we need to separate our race from other racists. That's what they're talking about. Completely open about it.
Civilization as the other two. This trichotomy appears in the highest order superstructure of Western civilization, and in microcosm as one examines subsystems. It appears in the United States in the form of the judicial, executive, and legislative powers, and additionally within the legislative in the United States itself, in the relationship between President, Senate, and House. It can also be applied to contemporary politics. Land cites a chart excavated from the depths of the internet.
Look at this fucking chart. This is the reason why I wanted to do this video, because of how fucking complicated this chart is. Unnecessarily complicated. And even when he goes through it, I don't even think I'm going to fully grasp this. But, like, I love the corners of these things. We got communism, individualism, absolutism, and then Darwinism is on this side, and we got republicanism and totalitarianism down here. And I love that, like, totalitarianism is between communism and absolutism. And, like, I don't know. And, like, all the little things, you got, like, socialism is right here.
Yeah.
And, like, China is here. And, yeah, Jesus Christ. Let's go.
I want someone to, like, remap the political compass onto, like, Carl Sagan's fucking hypercube or something. Like a 4-dimensional political fucking compass.
No, they should do it to Time Cube. Remember that, dude?
Oh, fucking God.
Time Cube is an old internet meme that I hope everyone is aware of. Okay, let's get into some of the specifics here. Oh, this is going to be good.
That serves as a useful model for this purpose.
This is a useful
We can
model.
see left and right represented in an unusual triangular fashion.
You know, this line that goes left and right is now a triangle. There's like
unusual triangular fashion.
I mean, he does have a left and a right here, but, like, it's a triangle, so why can't this be left and right? And why can't, or you know, maybe he's like, there's, like, several different left and right vertices within the... Jesus Christ.
This lends itself to the trichotomy, and we can see it clearly laid out on the corners. To the left, there is utopia, promulgated by the clergy, who at present happens to be the cathedral. This...
So...
All right, I'm already lost. All right.
I know.
No,
Well, like, because he says by the clergy. Now, like, I'm like, are you just talking about religion, or are you specifically saying that I'm using my, like, euphemistic language because we call it the cathedral? Because, like, as I said, they think that media and the universities are communist. They think that. So even though I, as someone who was a student at one of these cathedral institutions, let me tell you, it was very much not communistic. As much as young communist Jody really wanted them to be, they were not. And yet they think that's what they think. So it's the cathedral, that end of the triangle.
I think, like, I feel very jaded right now because I feel like we looked at this triangle, right? We studied everything. You know, we were ready for the test. And then he comes up talking about utopia and the clergy. That's not on the fucking cheat sheet. Where is this? Where is it? Where's it supposed to be?
I also feel like what's not going to be explained is this weird dotted line triangle that's in the middle of it.
That's the hyper triangle.
Well, yeah, and then there's that triangle.
That's where hyper racism is located.
Like libertarianism. This is where Ron Paul is apparently on this chart.
Ron Paul lives right there. That's where he lives.
Yeah.
Chavez, not that far. Chavez lives right next door.
Where's Chavez?
To the left. He's to the left.
Oh my god!
Cameron.
Yeah, just right there. Oh, that's a short direction to Chavez. I love Obama right and Chavez are just side by side.
They're they're right there. All of them
and Bush,
super far from Hitler though.
Bush and Chavez.
Bush and Chavez.
What the hell is going on?
They live, they're the same homeowners association. They play bridge on the weekends. It's fine.
Jesus Christ. And Pinochet is just floating out here.
It's just, we don't talk to Pinochet anymore. No, he's done.
Easy 1,000 followers? I don't know who you are, Dad Zag. I feel like you're hacking me. Dad Zag!
This is a pathological dysfunction of the trichotomy. The church has been subverted by the cathedral, as identified by neo-reactionaries, and is at present not serving its intended purpose.
So that part confuses me, because now it sounds like he's saying that the church should be here. Why should the church be here? I don't
Jody,
understand it.
Listen.
And the church has been corrupted with communism.
Listen. I'm gonna break it down. I had a fucking mind meld moment with this guy. I'm ready to go. Okay.
All right.
Right.
Bring it.
What do you have on screen? You have a triangle.
Yeah.
What does it have? It has 3 points. Okay.
Okay.
What happens if you take one of those points away? It's not a triangle anymore. You need the third point.
It's a trapezoid? If you like. I can't do it. I used my hand on my screen, but
all right, boomer. Nice work. No, you need all 3 points, but 1 point can't be longer than the other, or else it's not a perfect triangle. That's what Pythagoras' theorem tells us when he told it to us to Moses during the seminar to Plato.
We need to get Paige on here to teach us about trigonometry. All right.
It is attempting to drag politics towards the new god of progress, and having aberrated from its normative aim of promoting Christianity, it is being rejected by the other two estates. This created the left-right divide as it exists today. Originally, this divide was between the second and third estates. Egalitarianism emerged as a phenomenon of the third estate during the French Revolution, but over time it has morphed from a populist idea focused on the people of a nation to a religious idea modeled after the Christian idea of all humans being fundamentally valuable. Thankfully, this liberated the Third Estate from this idea to a substantial degree, and it is now creating nationalist movements to oppose the cathedral, like antibodies opposing a disease.
Okay, so to make sure I understand this is like a fucking Hideo Kojima fucking story, isn't it? Like the Third Estate rose in power and overthrew itself, and now it has to go back in time to kill itself before it overthrows itself.
Yeah,
and that's why we need the anime girl with a gun.
So it's like these people overthrew the monarchy and became NPCs, which then now make up the cathedral. But because the NPCs are now worshipping a false god of progress, you now have these nationalists that show up here. The racists show up. All because the racists are really the antibodies to this disease of people fighting for progress.
Okay, so explain to me then why anime is here.
I don't know, that we just got there. I mean, he's letting his degeneracy slip in a little bit here.
Antibodies opposing a disease. Capitalism, of course, remains.
That's capitalism? This is capitalism?
Capitalism is
anime girl with a gun. All right, let's see where this goes.
In opposition to the cathedral due to progressivism's marriage to Marxism. Hence the present dynamic. The cathedral, operating as the clergy, is opposed by capitalists, who are the nobles, and the nationalists, who are the commoners. This...
All right.
So fucking lost, Jesus Christ.
All right, anime my boy.
Clergy is opposed by capitalists.
Okay, the clergy are opposed by the capitalists.
Who are the nobles, and the nationalists,
and the nationalists
who are the commoners.
Are the commoners. And so these two are opposing the clergy. The commoners and the capitalists oppose the clergy, which are the communists. Okay.
This gives us the interesting situation in which the left is unipolar and the right is dipolar. Okay. Normally, these estates would act as moderating influences on one another, keeping society within a relatively stable equilibrium. With the clergy in a state of rebellion, the other two are seeking to assert themselves and...
Okay, so...
All right.
What he's saying is because the cathedral is now represented by the communists and not the real clergy, these two are going to be at war with the left.
And so that okay, so now we need anime.
Well, capitalism represented by anime girl with gun.
Okay,
and the nationalists. But does that mean that the capitalists and the nationalists are like teaming up? I mean, like I guess.
And make up for the systemic failure. This clarifies patterns we see in contemporary politics. The left is more organized and focused than the right, because the left side of the axis converges into a singularity.
This is like, why did the right wing think this? All it takes is like one night at a leftist party to realize that we all yell at each other constantly. Have they not been present during the epic war of the force the vote debacle? It's been like decimating the online left for this like last little bit. Like even Ezra had this on his show recently, where he's like the one
triangle?
thing that the left, he probably fucking believes in this bullshit, but he was like the reason why like the right constantly loses to the left is because the left are completely unified and all on the same page and they don't eat their own, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? They're delusional. I mean, I also think that there's a similar vibe that like a lot of lefties think about right-wing people, that they're all like on the same page, and I don't think that's true either. And I think that's kind of represented here because you have like the factions who are like more hyper-capitalists arguing with like the closed border nationalists and all that fun shit. So
far leftists are more likely to agree with each other than center leftists are. This is why you can see disagreement among center leftists, yet they are inexorably pulled further left by the focused action of the far left. The right diverges into opposing components. Notice how there is actually as much distance between both extremes of the right as there is between either of them to the far left.
I love how he's using his self-imposed diagram that does not like... It's just artificial. You drew a fucking diagram, but he goes, but notice, they're the same distance. Dog, they're the same distance because I drew a triangle.
What is wrong with the American education system currently? Like, of all the things, like, I think people have talked about this before, but what is the thing that's driving our young people to, like, make videos where they opine about bullshit? Like, what is this? Like, from whence does this, like, need to, like, view yourself as, like, the professoriate come from? Like, what is it? What is that? What is the deep trauma that we've inflicted on people where they feel like they need to have some sacred knowledge that puts them in the sort of the coveted recognized seat, right? What is that?
You know what it reminds, like, this reminds me a lot of people who were in classes with me. And so for those who don't know, I did an undergraduate and then a master's degree in philosophy.
Oh my God, just brag more. Jesus, God.
The point about saying this is I was more of an analytic philosopher. But like I shared classes with people who were more interested in like postmodern types of philosophy, which is fine. I'm not here to denigrate postmodernism. But I will say, there's one thing that some postmodernists even adopt this as a point of pride, which is that they're less constrained by a certain argumentative strategy, right? But in doing that, their work becomes a little bit more opaque, and I find a little bit more open to interpretation. And I think that can be fine for like creative endeavors. But what I found with a lot of my classmates is they would spend hours reading a like Heideggerian text and drawing diagrams like this and feeling like they're coming to some sort of like deeper understanding of the world, where to me it felt like all they were doing was connecting patterns in some old dude's work rather than like actually gaining any insight here, right? Which is what I feel like is going on here. This is someone who read a bunch of Nick Land and a bunch of these Dark Enlightenment people and is being like, oh man, I'm finding all these patterns here and watch as I break down and categorize this thing. But it's like, what's good is you, like, are you really, how do I say this? Like advancing human knowledge here? Or are you just like going deeper in your own sort of like cultic conspiracy here of connecting dots, three, and they're all three, and three this, right? Where it's like, why do you think this is the more useful way of describing the world? Like that's what I said earlier when I said that they don't go deep into like why they believe the certain things that they believe. Like for example, when you talk about the trichotomy there, like why is ethno-nationalists good? Why is like it worth considering them? And they never like go into that depth. It's just they exist, and therefore like the problem is that the cathedral exists, and we need to like recreate or recorrect this trichotomy such that the clergy is back in its rightful place, and we have a monarchy again, right? But it's like, why? Why is this better? And it's like just hidden under this like arcane symbolism. It's like whatever. Which makes them I feel like I've accomplished something. I put in some work. I drew a diagram. I put in the work.
You can just say it though, you know? This is like the one thing I can say, like, I could say this stuff from like, and you could say this too, from years in like academia. Like, it's so much better when someone just says what they mean and they don't hide it behind a bunch of bullshit. Just say the thing. Just say it.
But how do you, like, I find that I wouldn't know how to say it if I was them, though. Like, if you're a racist, all it comes down to is a kind of intuition. It's not based on facts. It's like,
right,
black people. Which isn't
just
a good
say
argument,
that.
you know? But
just say it, though.
I feel like these more intellectual right-wing people know that they're not going to convince people with that, right? So they gotta, like, make some fucking arcane theory. Like, you can't just grunt at people like, race is bad. Like, that's not going to convince anyone, so you got to make it sound pseudo-intellectual. At least that's what I feel like they're doing.
No, I agree with that.
This is why right-wingers argue with each other so much, especially as they become further right. To anarchists and capitalists, the monarchists and nationalists are leftists because state control over liberty and the economy are inherently leftist.
I'm going to back that up a bit. I want to say there's something interesting there, that he's just conflating anarchy with capitalism. That seems problematic to me.
To anarchists and capitalists, the monarchists and nationalists are leftists because state control over liberty and the economy are inherently leftist. To the monarchists and nationalists, the anarchists and capitalists are to the left, to the degree that they undermine the nation. Both think that they are the true right, and both identify the left as a common enemy. The left also identifies both as right-wing. So again, the tripolar rather than dipolar model is affirmed as an accurate map of the ideological forces at play in Western civilization. Both of them actually are on the right, despite being in opposition to one another. Additionally, the argument of is fascism socialism or is fascism left or right wing is also solved here. The answer is clearly that fascism is both not socialist and is right wing. You can see why some people on the right argue that fascism is leftist and socialist. It is as far from the capitalists as socialism is.
I love this because it's like implicit here is like we need to take Dinesh D'Souza seriously. Right? Because it's like he's one of the big person who's like fascism definitely is a left-wing ideology, and he's like, nah, Mr. Dinesh, clearly on my arbitrary triangle chart the distance from capitalism to fascism is just as short as capitalism to socialism. So therefore it both seems that even though like socialism to fascism, it's like the same distance, so it forms another like triangle thing here. See?
Oh my god, it's the triangle. It's triangles all the way down. That's how it fits together. I understand now. I get it.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I can kind of see why fascism is down in the monarchy corner. I think like a lot of people like bicker, and there are technical reasons for why fascism and feudalism are sort of like two separate things, and I realize it's not good to conflate the two. But I find often a lot of people who like appreciate feudalism in some capacity all tend to also appreciate fascists in some capacity. And I think there's like there's a blending of several things there, which is I think that fascism has an appreciation of some sort of like mythical past, whether that be the Roman emperors or whether that be the feudal lords, right? So fascism today kind of like brings on board those other ideologies, even though it like adds other shit that I don't think the feudalists of their time would have accepted, right?
However, fascism is just as far from socialism, and fascism operated in opposition to both socialism and capitalism when it existed, which one would expect from this diagram. You can also see this in the language used to describe fascism as a third way. It is a third way that is distinct from both capitalism and socialism. The left-right axis is insufficient to accurately describe this fundamental trichotomy, which is why this argument is so often rehashed and yet unsolved. However, the left-right axis is sufficient to describe the central conflict of modernity. The existence of this trichotomy does not invalidate other modes of analysis. It merely provides another view of society that is more useful in demonstrating certain dynamics. The battle between left and right is real, and there are only two sides at the end of it. It is just that on one side there is a singular entity, and on the other there are two. Now that we understand...
So, this is what frustrates me. He feels like he's come to this like mythical conclusion here, and like as you could tell, like the dichotomy itself isn't like totally false because there is a left and a right wing, but like all this fun stuff, right? But I think that what this graph does not appreciate is that the anarcho-capitalists are a lot closer to the fascists than they themselves want to appreciate. And they think that they're doing different things, but they're not. And I actually think that's inherent as well in the neo-reactionary material. Because even if, like, when you get into, like, Mencius Moldbug, like, his whole position there is that what you need is, like, a kind of, like, monarchy that allows for a kind of anarcho-capitalism to exist, to subsist within the, like, feudal realm in some sense. That, like, what you need is, like, this efficient dictator to do all, like, the tinkering on top to create, like, a coherent, structured society such that you can have your, like, little anarchist capitalist thing going on underneath it. That somehow, like, you need the order to get the freedom. Kind of, like, weird dichotomy thing going on there. And that sounds like, whoa, profound, bro. But it's like, how many dictators do you know actually work that way? You know? They don't really work that way, do they? Because dictators get in there and then they're like, I'm going to kill people. What are you going to do? Stop me? Oh my God.
Understand this trichotomy and how it relates to contemporary politics, what is to be done with this information? It is clear that the two components of the right should not attempt to merge in order to mimic the left. This isn't so much a strategic choice as it is a law of nature. This chart is not a graph of options, but a graph of how people think. There are fundamental differences between individualism and absolutism that prevent any coherent unification between them. However, many...
So you know what he's saying there then? This is itself an essentialist argument. His argument is like, this is a state of nature. This is just the way things are. But then it's like, if this is the way things are, how did it get corrupted? How did the communists overthrow the cathedral?
Yep.
Don't understand this. Well, I do understand it. I don't understand why this guy thinks he's so profound, you know? But even if it is like a state of nature, like, I get this idea. This is why they don't have to justify their ethno-nationalist bullshit. It's the same thing, right? It's because it's like, at the end of the day, this is just the way the world is. There just are these differences, and these people are like this, and there's nothing we can do. And the best, so that's why like they all support this kind of boogaloo thing, not because they're necessarily like on board with like anarcho-capitalism, but they're like, we want a civil war too, because this will like destroy the corruption of the communist thing, right? Because like you can't actually do anything. It's just life is what it is. You can't change. You can't affect the system, man. You can't change the system, bro. You just gotta wait for it to collapse and for a monarchy to take over and then fix everything.
You can't change, John. Can't fight gravity. Oh, you didn't play Red Dead Redemption. You don't know what this is from.
No. One day when I have a better computer.
Some of you played Red Dead Redemption, and you know we need to rob Tahiti.
Yeah.
Ideologically stand away from the edges of this triangle, amalgamating their preferences from all three poles. This is the material from which political parties organize, and is the area in which the poles can cooperate. In the present situation, when one pillar of Western civilization has been so perverted, it is even more critical that the other two remain stable. The proper role for the individualist and absolutist pillars in the current scenario is to prevent a slide into leftist oblivion, but also not to create an equal imbalance towards another pole in doing so.
Like how he's acknowledging that they're right-wing death squads and like, and anime with guns.
With guns. Let's do it.
Balance towards another pole in doing so. The Darwinian ground between them is ripe for cooperation, and in the United States, the Republican Party is potentially evolving to fill this role. Similar phenomenon exist in Europe, with both individualists and nationalists opposing globalists. It is a tricky situation to manage the equilibrium between individualism and absolutism, and furthermore, there is an even more fundamental problem to be solved. If a moderation among these three estates is indeed the foundation of Western civilization, then the precondition for having a successful civilization is a secure existence of these estates. The clergy still exists in its original form, but it has been massively disempowered and essentially replaced. In order to properly strike...
I love that he made these things and then animated them.
I appreciate it. I really do. That's not even a joke. I really appreciate the amount of work that has been put into this for my benefit.
You'll find too that a lot of these neo-reactionaries tend to be Catholics as well. So my guess is we're gonna get to it is this this defiled church over here was the papacy, is my guess. And the papacy somehow has been replaced by, like, I guess what they're going to say is like Lady Gaga wearing nothing at a Super Bowl, which is represented by communism, is representative of communism, apparently. You know how it is.
Strike the balance of powers that is Western civilization, a restoration of the clergy is necessary.
Gotta bring that Pope back.
It is not
Gotta
sufficient
bring
for the
that
right
Pope
to merely
back.
be a negation of the left. It must positively reconstitute the traditional system. To
We
bring
need to
this back to the
repopulate.
neo-reactionary trichotomy itself, it is the role of the capitalists to protect the liberty of the individual. It is the role of the nationalists to secure the existence of the nation in which these individuals reside, and it is the role of the religious tradition to orient the people of this nation towards a superordinate metaphysical aim. These three forces acting in tandem with appropriately principled approaches to each other are what it will take to restore Western civilization.
There you have it. What you need is the techno-capitalists, the racists, and the Catholic Church to combine to save the universe.
Or at least to build a successor.
To save Western civilization, which is in decay because Lady Gaga was almost naked in a Super Bowl performance, and that itself is communism.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm on board with this. I can get behind this. I got it.
You'd be dead.
I say appropriately principled to denote the fact that there are certain compromises to be made with each other, and other ideals that are uncompromisable. To be clear, the idea that Western civilization exists as a moderation of these three estates is not to say that the correct opinion on any particular issue is in the middle, simply by virtue of being a centrist position. If we consider the three estates mathematically, the median of the three poles is directly in the center. Likewise, adding moderated positions approaching the center results in the same calculation. The goal is to keep society in the safe zone, regardless of the calculus that sustains it. To give an example, the clergy cannot compromise on the existence of God. In the Jewish tradition, there are many atheists who consider themselves to be Jewish. In the Christian domain, Jordan Peterson professes the value of Christianity, yet appears to be an atheist. People in these categories may be useful in some way to religious traditions, but ultimately there must be those who affirm the metaphysical reality of...
You're not good enough, Jordan Peterson, because you're not a pope. Look at you with your pragmatic religious beliefs. Get the fuck out of here. We need a pope.
So this is a joke, right? Oh, this video, we're going to get to the end in the next 30 seconds. And this guy's going to go, you fucking idiots. I can't believe you watched 13 minutes of this.
What?
Please, that's going to happen, right?
You got a sneak argument for Pope? Pope 2, Electric Boogaloo?
God. Anything else is unsustainable, and will suffer the same fate as the Christian church has under the progressive cathedral. If you want to learn more about the role of tradition...
No, I don't want to learn more. So what we need is God. That's what we're missing. That's the puzzle piece. Didn't you know? All we needed. Jordan Peterson doesn't go far enough because his God is like a wishy-washy possibility of a God. Right? It's like, well, like his isn't. He doesn't believe in God. So for those of you who don't know about like Jordan Peterson's sort of like theology, the idea is like he doesn't care about the metaphysical truth of religious propositions, but to him, like believing in religion and the stories that are involved in religious belief, that has a useful function to like good behavior. The kind of shit that is down here and right tradition, patriarchy, family, right? Like all these things, Jordan Peterson is going to say that they're good, but he's going to say like it doesn't really matter about the metaphysical truth. And what this dude who made this video is saying is that no, even Jordan Peterson is not good enough. He might be useful in like starting to move people in the direction, but there needs to be the metaphysical belief in a real existing deity, and that will complete the trifecta, will restore the church to its rightful place in the trichotomy, and therefore Western civilization will be saved. Hooray! What you got was a 13-minute argument for the existence of God through a race realist.
Triangles, man. Triangles.
Which is the thing, he never brought up the Trinity. This is like, he could have done it, and he didn't do it. He didn't do it, but that's okay. So we're going to be done now. That was a fun 2 hours. I wanted to do that video for a while now, so yeah, I'm glad that it worked. And I will say, if people enjoyed the neo-reactionary stuff, I'm going to search out for more. If you have any recommendations of some shitty neo-reactionary videos, even ones that I haven't seen before, just send them to me, and then like maybe we can go in blind. But I want to do something with especially Moldbug. I find his thought intriguing as like an example of something that I want to distill more, and the fact that he's sort of like the more popular one, and I feel like he's a bit more slippery in that, unlike Nick Land, as we've discussed, and who is being used here for this whole trichotomy bullshit. Nick Land is a pretty much like out and out like racist. Obviously, I mean, he coined his own hyper racism. Hyper racism. And so Mensch's Moldbug actually like plays. He has said. Mensch's Moldbug has definitely said some shit. Like, I think he was like okay with slavery. Like he's said stuff like this, but he's also said some stuff where he's like focusing on race is a bit weird. But he still wants to talk about biological race sometimes. But he tries to play the game where Nick Land is kind of like out there, right? But I think it's worth sort of like breaking that down. I don't want Mensch's Moldbug to go out there and perform his bullshit and get to dog whistle without being coated with the stank that's clearly involved with all this bullshit. And he's one of these people as well where he's more of the Jordan Peterson type when it comes to the religion stuff. From like the talks that I've heard, he hasn't fully endorsed that what we need is like God. He seems more that we need some sort of like deity type figure as like the monarch or whatever to restore everything. But similar bullshit. But anyways, I'm not exactly allergic to white nationalism. Yes, I think that is something that he said. And from what I don't want to like make him sound better than he is, because even uttering that is utterly shitty and doesn't need defending. But the context, I think, in which he said that, if I'm not mistaken, was that like there's this certain trend, and you notice it with people like James Lindsay on the internet or other assholes like this, which is like, or Dave Rubin is a perfect example of this. We should be able to have conversations. Why can't I openly talk about white nationalism, right? And so, at least I believe the context of that quote, although I think he's said way worse than that, was that it's like, we should be allowed to discuss these things because we're all like adults, right? Like, isn't that part of the thing? I should be allowed to talk about whether race is real. But clearly, we allowed people to talk about whether or not race is real on the internet, and now we got this shit happening. And we got Trump as president, and we got fucking racists coming back. Well, you know, they're still around. They never left. But they're a little bit more vocal than I want them to be. I want them to like I feel like in the 90s it started to become like embarrassing to like dress up in the robes and shit like that. And now it's like they're putting those robes back on. And this is almost as embarrassing as like the Ku Klux Klan mythology of like wizard hoods and stuff like this. We need a new pope, you know? So, yeah, I hope this goes away. But if, in the meantime, I'm going to continue creating content pointing out how stupid it is so that it doesn't... you could send people here and I'll be like, stop it. Stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. Become a leftist. And on that note, because we're not out of our capitalist hellhole, consider donating to my Patreon. I would appreciate it. Our podcast is slowly moving out of the red. We have just enough. Patrons donating that we are not losing money each month, which is nice. But I would love a new microphone. My microphone's behaving very weird lately, and it would be nice to have one of those fancy mics that'll make me sound smooth and delicious. And so if you want to help in that endeavor, please, you could donate as little as $1 a month. It'll be appreciated. So consider that. Also, tell people about these streams. I'm very close. Now that I think I've gotten 2 more subs, so we're like 5 or 6 people away from being able to do emotes and subscriptions and all that fun stuff on Twitch. And so if you enjoyed that, please consider telling your friends to follow, and we can start doing emotes. I would love it. I would love it. And thanks for everyone who showed up. It looked like we had a bunch of people watching this whole time, which is appreciated. So thank you. And let's raid somebody. Let's see who we got here. Oh, yes. I don't think I've been able to raid Bad Praxis yet. I like the Bad Praxis people. They do good stuff. They are wonderful lefties that I appreciate. And so, send them love. Alron, say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you for watching.
Yes. Now I gotta wait for the countdown before I can raid, and then I will be like, 3, 2, 1. Goodbye, everyone!